Hey guys, in this video we'll be learning how to make this 2-color baby hat, which is good for 6 to 12 months. And it's got this like little box pattern on it. Hope you guys like it. Let's get started. Alright, so things to note. The pattern is really easy, so you should be able to catch on to it like fairly quickly. And it's a hat you could pretty much knit in a day. Don't forget that you can choose whatever color you want. I'm using these two because it's for a friend. So pick your colors and let's get started. Things you will need. Size 8 knitting needles. I'll be using these circular ones, which if you've seen my other videos, you'll see that I always use these. Of course, you don't have to use these. You can use pretty much any size 8 needles you feel more comfortable with, as long as they're size 8. You'll also need some scissors, a divider to put whenever you start a new row, yarn needles, which you will use when you are closing off the hat, and some double pointed needles, which I use to close off the hats, and this is completely optional. And last but not least, the yarn. I will be using this cute little yellow and black. And you don't have to use these colors, you can use any color you want. Also, be aware that when you're using 2 different colors on a hat, it's good to use the same brand because you want the same thickness. All yarn is different depending on the brand and size. You don't want to mix 2 different brands or 2 different sizes because it won't turn out right. These 2 that I'm using are the same brand, and if you look at them, you can always compare and see that they are the same thickness. I know it's a little dark because of the black. Alright, so we're going to begin by casting on 67 stitches. Make sure you leave a long enough tail for that. And now we can go ahead and make our first knot. Once you have your 67 stitches, we can go ahead and bring them together. And we're going to do that by bringing your first stitch over to your other needle. And then we're going to take the last cast on you did and bring that one over your first one. It's okay if it stretches out a little. And it's going to look like this, kind of funky, but don't worry, just pull on it and then you can close that up. Now we can go ahead and place our stitch marker and begin the pattern. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna knit 3 and then purl 3, and we're gonna do that for the entire row. So that'll be your first row. Now we can go ahead and move the stitch marker over and continue on with the next row. And we're just going to repeat this for another 7 rows, so we'll have 8 in total. Once you have your 8 rows, we are gonna knit the entire row. And if you ever lose count, you can always count these like little braids right here that you'll see from the knit stitch. And each one is a row, so you can always count them and make sure you have 8. Okay, so now we can go ahead and knit the entire row, and then we're gonna begin with the pattern. And also changing the yarn over to the other color. We're also going to be decreasing 2 stitches, and by doing that we're simply going to knit 2 stitches together twice. We're only going to do this twice because we only want to decrease 2 stitches, and you can pretty much do it wherever you want. I'm going to be knitting them together, so I'll probably do it over one of the knit ones. And it doesn't matter where, just as long as you do it twice. I chose pretty much randomly on the hat. So that would be my first decrease. So here's gonna be my second decrease. And once you've done that, you should end up with 64 stitches on your next row. And now you can pretty much just continue as you were doing. Once you've knit the entire row, we can go ahead and move the stitch marker again. And the pattern is fairly easy. We are basically going to be knitting 7 and purling 1, but we're going to start by knitting 4. And we're only going to do the first row with the yellow yarn, and we're going to switch over to the black yarn on the next row. We're going to repeat this pattern for 3 rows, and then we're going to switch it up a bit. Now we can go ahead and purl 1. And then we'll go back to knitting 7. And we knit 1 again. I mean purl. That's a purl. And then after that we will knit 7 again. And it should even out when you come around to the other side. Since we knit 4 here at the beginning, we'll end up only having to knit 3 at the end. Alright, so here's where we're going to change colors. And to do that, we are simply going to start knitting with the black yarn, or whatever color you have chosen. So we'll take it and simply, we will do like we're about to knit, but instead of going back with the yellow, we'll hook the black yarn on it, or with, again, whatever color you've chosen. And then we can continue on knitting the pattern. So we're going to knit 4 with the new color, and then we are going to pause for a little bit. So you'll see how we have these hanging over here, and don't worry, it's not going to come loose. The only thing we need to do here is simply cut off the yellow yarn. So what I like to do is just do a little, kind of like a little knot. You don't have to do this. It's honestly not required. I just do it because I always feel like, hey, they might come loose. And I'm gonna double knot it. And that's it. You can cut these so you don't see them. I'll do that at the end. But then And then we turn your hat over, and that's it. We've switched colors. It was that easy. We can go back to purling. And then back to your knit 7. Once we've got our 3 rows, we're gonna go ahead and purl 5, and this is only for the beginning. Then we're going to go back to knitting 7. Once you've got your 7, we're going to go ahead and purl 9, and this is what we're going to do for the entire row. It's going to be purl 9 and then knit 7, and we're only going to repeat this for 2 rows. So once we've done our 2 rows, we're pretty much gonna sort of go back to the beginning where we did the knit 4 and then purl 1. Gonna go ahead and purl 1, and then we're gonna knit 7 again. We're going to do this for the entire row, and we're only going to repeat it for 3 rows. Once you've done your 3 rows, you can see how your pattern's starting to look. So we're going to go on to the next one. And with this one, we are going to once again knit 4. But instead of purling 1, we're going to go ahead and purl 9. We're going to repeat this for 2 rows. Once you finish those 2 rows, we're going to go back to the beginning and repeat the pattern. We're going to repeat this pattern 2 more times, and then after that we're only going to repeat the first 3 rows. Once you've done the 2 repeats, you can step back and look at the pattern. So as I mentioned before, we were only going to repeat it 2 more times. So if you look at it, you should have like these 3 little bars standing out when you are at your stitch marker point. And now we're only going to repeat the first 3 rows of the pattern, and after that we're going to start closing it off. We'll start by knitting 4, purling 1, then we're going to knit 7, and this is what we'll do for the entire row, and we're going to repeat this 3 times. After you've done your 3 rows, we can go ahead and begin closing off, and we're going to do that by knitting the first 2, and then we're going to knit these 2 together, then we're going to go back and purl 1, we're going to knit these 2 together as well, then we're going to go ahead and knit 3, and we're going to knit the last 2 together, and that's basically what you're going to do for the entire row. So you're basically knitting the first 2 and the last 2 of each section together. These are our last 3. We're going to knit those 2 together and then knit 1. We'll go ahead and move the stitch marker over. On the next row we are going to knit the entire row. We're not going to be doing any decreases on this one, just knitting the entire row. And then once you've knit that whole row, we can go ahead and do a decrease again. So for this next one, we are going to knit 2 together for the entire row. And that's all we're going to do. after you've knit those two together, we should end up with about 24 stitches, and you'll see it's already getting pretty tight. So this is when I'm gonna start switching over to the double pointed needles, and as I've said before, you don't have to do this. I'm just gonna do it because I find it easier. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the stitch marker, because for the next row we are just gonna knit two together for the rest of the row too. So I've got my needles. I'm only gonna use 4 of them. I never really use all 5. And if you are continuing on these, or whatever needles you're using, you would just continue on knitting 2 together for the entire row. I'm just going to be doing that on these. So you should end up with a total of 12 stitches, and this is how it's gonna look. Of course, if you stayed on with the circular needles, it'll pretty much look the same, just on these. And now we can go ahead and close it up. In order to close it up, we are going to be using our yarn needles that I mentioned earlier. So just leave a long enough tail, and then you can go ahead and cut it. Got my scissors right here. So you can go ahead and put the yarn through the needle. And then we're going to go to our first stitch over here and simply pass it through. And then we can remove it from the needle, and that's it. We're going to do that all the way around. Every time you pass it through, just remove it from the needle. Alright, so once your needles are out, you can just go ahead and pull on it. And there it is. It's closed up now. So this is what the hat should look like. And don't forget that you'll be folding this up. there's your hat. Remember, once you close it in on here, you can stick the needle in through the middle and then turn it inside out. And you can start weaving the yarn through these layers over here. And then once you've done that enough, you can tie a little knot and then simply cut off the extra yarn. You can also do the same for this. Let me take it off here for a second. In order to get rid of the extra yarn over here, simply pass it through the needle. And because this is going on the inside, you won't really see it. So you can just put it through wherever you want. This is just an example, you don't have to do it this way. I think that's as far as I want to go with that. So once you've done that for a little bit, you can go ahead and cut that. And then don't forget about your yarns over here. You can also go ahead and snip those. And because we did it right here, they shouldn't be noticeable. But there's your hat. Hope you guys liked the video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Feel free to leave them in the comments section. And don't forget to check out the description, because I'll always write the written pattern in the description section so it'll be easier to follow along. Thanks for watching.